Ayatollah, excuse me, this is a book which is translated, and published in the United States at Berkeley. And this theologian, without knowing the least thing concerning science, by the examination of the Quranic, the examination of the Quranic text only, was able to come to the same theory of creative evolution. That is to say, the notion of a permanent creation for the living being through transformations of the genies, and to obtain a certain evolution. But now the evolution is not absolutely, it's very well known, the evolution in the animal species, in the animal kingdom, is not absolutely continuous in the course of the time. Some species, after a certain evolution, came to a halt. This is very well known, with the two examples which are famous. It is one of the famous fish, the coelacanth, and the something which is more common. It is a cockroach. The cockroach are the same one since 200 or 300 millions of years. Evolution is not continuous in the animal kingdom. As to man, it is another thing. It is transformations of the created human species. I have explained that in detail in my book, What is the Origin of Man? And unfortunately, I think I have not the time in 15 or 20 minutes to give you all the necessary explanation.
The second question is, what is the concept of time according to Quran?
Oh, it's difficult to give you an answer about concept of time about the Quran. I should be very pleased to know what is exactly the concept of time according to the Quran. Well, some scientists suppose that in the Quran there is an allusion to relativity. For me, I doubt. Maybe I am wrong, and they are right.
Could you please point out a few of the glaring inadequacies of the translation of the Quran that you came across?
At first, I want to explain you that if I have suggested to revise several translations from the Quran, it is only about a very small number of verses. That is to say, in my book, The Bible, the Quran and Science, I have quoted in the complete edition, not the edition that you have in the United States. I have written an index of the quotation from the Quran, and there is a little bit more than 150 verses only. The verses which might be connected with science, and not at all the verses having only an aim of religious teaching, not at all. So that it is a very small number of verses concerning science, but they are of the utmost importance. And I want to give you an example. I see before me a translation which I know perfectly well by Marmaduke Pickthall. Since a long time I used, for my studies of the Quran, translation in French and also translation in English. I used Yusuf Ali, which is a wonderful translation. I used in English also Marmaduke Pickthall. But I think that like you, I imagine you all think that it is an excellent translation. But concerning a small number of verses, I cannot accept the translation of Marmaduke Pixel. For example, when I said for the word Sabaha, Yazbahun, Kulun fi Falakini Yazbahun. Bon, what is the translation of Marmaduke Pixel? I have controlled it before this lecture. Marmaduke Pixel, they float, because a derivative meaning of Sabaha is to swim in water. And they say float for the celestial formation. Maybe this is poetic, but it is not the expression of the primitive meaning of the word, which is to move with one's own motion. For example, Marmaduke Pixel translate kinds instead of element of couples, kinds, azwaj. Kinds. It is not. It's a bad translation from a scientific point of view. That doesn't matter at all for the problem of the religious meaning of the Quran. You imagine, but it is only from the point of view of the possibility of connection between the Quranic teachings and modern science. And in the end. Clot, Ralakanil Sanamil Alak. Marmaduke Pixel translate clot, but man never came from a blood clot, from a clot, not at all. This is a derivative meaning. And he used it because, having not a scientific background, he was not in a position at all to imagine that this translation might be absolutely inaccurate. Excuse me, this is somewhat long, but I think it is necessary to tell you that.
The next question is, what is the association between the Quran and science?
It is. I have given the answer before the question.
And also, this is also a repetition of the very first question, Darwin's theory of evolution.
But I have a lecture to be given about the origin of man. I shall explain that in detail. About Darwin, that will be too long to explain you that now, because my explanation will not be sufficient. It's better not to give explanation which might seem to us, to you, to be somewhat light. I prefer to give an explanation in depth about the theory of Darwin during the lecture to come, inshallah.
Please. According to Surah, which you mentioned, that the origin of life is aquatic, how do we correlate this with Surah that Adam, peace be upon him, was elevated from clay,
yes,
and represent
the beginning of human race.
Human being.
Race, yes. Not human species. I prefer not race, because I'm not a racist.